Looking Up opens with two male Chinese astronauts conducting a press conference before heading to the Shiguang No. 16 spacecraft. They were Gook Singh, who had already been to space 4 times, and Ma Fei, who was about to embark on his maiden excursion into space. Everyone seemed to appreciate the two astronauts and encouraged them to accomplish their mission in space and safely return to Earth. However, as the reporters were preparing to conduct an interview session with the astronauts' families, Ma Fei noticed that his family had not attended the press conference. The scene then shifts back to September 1990, when Ma Fei was still a child and was dancing with his friends to welcome the Asian Games torch, which was carried by his father, Mahawan, an engineer who was instrumental in the construction of the Dongpai Bridge, which became the pride of all Chinese people at the time. Before jogging across the Dongpai Bridge, Mahawan presented his kid with a football-shaped globe and proudly held Ma Fei. However, the bridge they had proudly built crumbled, lowering Mahawan's prestige. Not only that, but he was sentenced to prison since he was considered careless in designing the bridge building and degraded his country's pride with his faults. Mahawan was eventually sentenced to 7 years in prison. After a year in prison, Mahawan was astonished by a visit from his wife, Sinyu, who wanted to file for divorce because she felt ashamed to be the wife of a failed engineer who caused the bridge to collapse before it was inaugurated. Mahawan couldn't resist his wife's request since he was also concerned about Ma Fei's future and didn't want to bring his son pain. Mahawan's days in prison were filled with tragedy since he was often targeted by the other prisoners. Ma Fei was also frequently harassed and humiliated due to his father's terrible reputation. When Ma Fei returned home that night, he discovered his mother having sex with a man named Meng, who promised to get him and his mother out of the position that had caused them so much pain and to send Ma Fei to a beloved school. 7 years later, in 1997, Mahawan was freed from prison and decided to return to his home in Dongpai City. However, the locals there still despise him for what happened a few years ago and believe he has shamed their city, thus Mahawan is eventually exiled. Not wanting to cause a scene, he eventually left and went to the residence of his ex-wife Sinyu, who now lives with Meng. He wants to meet his son since he misses him so much. However, Sinyu informs us that Ma Fei is not present because he is currently enrolled in Bullied High School, an exclusive local institution ranked among the top 4 in Dongpai. Not long later, Meng received a call from the principal, a guy named Yan, informing him that Ma Fei had been threatened with expulsion from school for missing class and reading a Jinyang martial arts novel. Hearing this, Sinyu and Meng dashed to Ma Fei's school, where they witnessed Principal Yan scolding Ma Fei in front of all the pupils. Sinyu and Meng then approached Principal Yan in his office and asked him not to expel Ma Fei from the school. However, Principal Yan persisted on removing him because he believed that a dumb student like Ma Fei would only destroy the school's good reputation. Meanwhile, Mahawan, who was also present, saw that one of the high-achieving students' images had disappeared from the wall display. Mahawan then went in to visit Principal Yan, who claimed that Principal Yan only cared about outstanding students and kicked students based solely on their marks. Hearing this, Principal Yan became even more irritated and refused to modify his mind, especially since the person standing in front of him was Mahawan, an ex-convict who had been convicted of insulting his country. Not content with being silent, Mahawan challenged Principal Yan, stating that he would educate Ma Fei until he reached the top 10 at his school. If it comes true, Principal Yan must enable Ma Fei to continue his education at Bullied High School until he graduates. Principal Yan finally agrees to let Ma Fei stay for a while, as long as he finishes in the top 10 of his class. Ma Fei was subsequently brought home by his father, where he expressed his disappointment that Mahawan had never communicated with him while he was in prison. He also apologized to his son and stated that he wanted Ma Fei to focus on his schooling without having to worry about him. The next day, he took his kid to a location where Mahawan planned to find work. However, after seeking for positions in numerous regions, no employer was ready to hire Mahawan due to his previous bad reputation. When he was about to leave, Mahawan ran into a man named Liu, who turned out to be a former employee. However, instead of assisting Mahawan in finding work, Liu summoned everyone present and mocked her in front of them. Ma Fei, irritated that his father was humiliated in public, shoved Liu and they raced away. A few days later, Mahawan ran across Liu, who was having trouble because none of his subordinates knew construction, and they couldn't continue working on the project. Knowing this, Mahawan volunteered to assist Liu by stating that he could solve the construction difficulty they were encountering in 2 minutes for a reasonable charge. Long story short, Mahawan finished the task in less than 2 minutes. Liu saw this and apologized for insulting and humiliating him. But Mahowan didn't mind as long as Liu gave him a job that paid him a fair wage. Mahowan eventually earned enough money to cover her expenses. One day, a man named Liu Detu, who used to be Mahowan's apprentice, appeared to be struggling with a building project he was working on. Liu Detu, recognizing Mahowan's desire for a permanent employment, recruited him for a hefty fee and supplied him and his kid with a comfortable location to reside. As they were going to sleep, Maffei informed his father that he was unsure about his top 10 goals. However, Maffei did not want to disappoint his father. Mahowan then calmed his son down by explaining that he only intended to bully Principal Yan, and that he only wanted Maffei to work more in school and not impose his will on the child he loves. Mahowan believes his son is a bright child, so he will work hard to aid him with his education. Mahowan also attempts to encourage his son to study in a variety of ways, rather than merely from schoolbooks, and to broaden his horizons. With his father's support, Maffei begins to study hard and eventually achieves a decent rank. Mahowan also worked harder to buy a computer for his son, making it simpler for Maffei to study. Soon after, a woman named Tan Qiang arrived at Mahowan's house. Tan Qiang turned out to be Maffei's homeroom teacher, who came to check on her health. Tan Qiang became enraged when he saw Maffei playing computer games and told Mahowan that computer games would cause children to be lazy about studying. However, Mahowan reasoned that studying too much would dull the youngsters and make it impossible for them to absorb the lesson, and Tan Qiang eventually realized this. Tan Qiang then informed Principal Yan that Maffei had made significant progress in his studies, rising 5 positions in his class. However, Principal Yan was unimpressed with Maffei's learning progress and looked down on him even more. The next day, while on his way to school, Maffei is unwittingly entangled in an incident with a bunch of thugs. Mahowan then assisted him and instructed him to rush to school while he confronted the thugs. Maffei was late for school as a result of the incident, and the principal chastised her for it. Principal Yan didn't stop there. She even suspended Tan Qiang's status as a permanent employee since she genuinely cared about Maffei. When Maffei returned home, he told his father that Tan Qiang was punished solely for standing up for him. However, Mahowan said nothing and merely exhibited his bruised face from being thrashed so hard by the attackers. On the other hand, Mahowan's neighbors, who knew he was the one who caused the Dongpai Bridge to fall, came to his house and were about to kick him out. But Mahowan got up and declared that he would never give up. The next day, Maffei got up early to write a note to his father, expressing his desire to be like his father, who would never give up. After that, Mahowan went to the police station to turn in some of the evidence he had gathered about the collapsed Dongpai Bridge, and Mahowan was certain that there were parties who misappropriated subpar construction materials because Mahowan had calculated everything. However, none of the cops were prepared to listen to his explanation, believing that Mahowan was making things up. Mahowan, frustrated that the police did not want to hear his explanation, accidentally injured Maffei's feelings when he yelled at her for being overly eager about the approaching airshow. But Mahowan quickly realized his error, apologized to Maffei, and promised to invite him to the show. However, Principal Yan refused to let Maffei leave the dormitory to see the airshow because she was about to take an exam. The next day, Maffei was impatient to leave the dormitory and witness the airshow with his father. But when they arrived, they had run out of tickets, so Mahowan brought him to a hill where they could see the airshow better. After that, Maffei and Mahowan boarded the bus for home. Maffei stepped off the bus in the middle of the ride to grab some hot water at the rest stop. However, Maffei boarded the wrong bus and was separated by his father. The father and son then searched for each other, but they were trapped in a strong storm, resulting in flash floods in the surrounding area. Mahowan would not give up easily and continued to search for his son. Maffei, on the other hand, uses his wits to build a rudimentary boat in order to avoid sinking, until he is eventually rescued by the SAR team and reunited with his father. The exam results were finally released a few days after the incident occurred. Maffei seemingly did not make the top 10 and finished in 64th place. Despite this, Mahowan was still proud of his son. Tan Qiang quietly slipped into the teacher's room to take Maffei's essay, because she thought it was strange that such a good essay would receive 0 marks. Tan Qiang then handed over the essay answer form to Mahowan before protesting in Principal Yan's room. Coincidentally, the teachers were also present. Mahowan evidently urged them to allow Maffei to read his essay in front of Principal Yan and the teacher council. Principal Yan first declined permission, but it appears that the other teachers agreed to allow Maffei to read his essay in front of them. It turns out that Mafi penned an essay about his desire to become an astronaut, as well as the challenges he encountered as the son of a man who was seen to have shamed his country. Nonetheless, Mafi has always been proud to be his father's son and feels that every child has the right to pursue their ambitions, especially if they have worked hard to make those dreams a reality. The teachers who heard the essay loved Mafi's ideas and decided to grant him a flawless mark. Hearing this, Mahawan was even more proud of his son, as were Xinyu and Meng, who were equally impressed with Mafi's article. After then, a crazed man entered the school grounds, and Principal Yan frantically ordered the security men to chase him away. However, Mahawan intervened and begged Principal Yan to reveal the true identity of the maniac to everyone. Because Principal Yan remained mute, Mahawan disclosed that the maniac was actually Principal Yan's son, who was an excellent student and was extremely proud of Principal Yan. However, after he received poor exam scores, Principal Yan became enraged and refused to consider him his son any longer. As a result, he developed depression and chose to commit suicide by jumping off the top of a building. However, he survived and sustained a concussion, which caused him to lose his sanity. Principal Yan burst into tears after hearing this. Mahawan stated that he had high regard for Principal Yan as a teacher, but he also encouraged Principal Yan to consider his position and responsibilities as a father. Several years later, Mafi was eventually accepted into the Aviation Academy and began pursuing his dream of becoming an astronaut. Meanwhile, Mahawan married Tan Qiang and had a lovely married life. However, Mahawan eventually discovered that the collapse of the Dongpai Bridge was not completely his fault, but that his subordinates purposely knocked down the bridge in order to secure prominent positions within the corporation. Mahawan would not simply let it go. He would take legal action to restore his reputation and clear his name. Mafi tried to urge his father not to do so and end everything, because they were already living happily together. However, Mahawan became even angrier and ended up in a fight with his own son, leaving him unhappy and unwilling to see Mafi again. Returning to the present, Mafi recognized that his father might be unable to forgive him. Therefore, he did not attend the news conference. Long story short, Mafi and his fellow astronauts successfully orbited outer space with their spaceship, making all Chinese people proud of their accomplishments in space missions. However, there was an issue with their spacecraft, as the communication antenna was destroyed after being hit by a meteor. Mafi was stranded in outer space for weeks until one day he discovered a message he had written to his father, in which he expressed his desire to be like his father, who never gave up. Mafi then decided to fix the transmission antenna, despite Gu Xing's warning that it was extremely risky. Unexpectedly, Mafi repaired the antenna and reconnected with their colleagues on Earth, allowing them to safely return home. After that, Mahawan approached his son, who had now fulfilled his dream and made everyone proud. Mafi then tells his father how proud he is to be his father's son. The message of this film is that we should never underestimate somebody, regardless of their background, because it is possible that that individual will achieve success in the future, whilst we will just get miserable because we are envious.